Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Without a Trace, a show about people who go missing without a trace. If you like true crime and creepy content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and without any further ado, let's get creepy. On a cold December night in 1991, a 21-year-old girl disappeared from her home in Kansas City. That girl's name is Gina Clark. Clark was 5'3" and weighed only 105 pounds. Her nickname was Pickle, which was written on the back of the red jacket she was wearing when she disappeared. She was also wearing black pants with sneakers. Later that night at 11:15 p.m., Clark made a call to her mother from an unknown location. Unfortunately, the call was disconnected and the authorities were unable to track where it came from. That was the last time Clark was heard from. Many have suspected that her kidnapper hung up the phone and prevented her from making another call, but that can't be said for sure. Wherever it is that Clark ended up, it was likely difficult for her. She suffered from Sydenham's chorea, which is a neurological disorder that causes rapid, irregular, and aimless involuntary movements of the arms, legs, trunk, and facial muscles. It also makes it difficult to maintain a posture. There are no current leads, and to this day, it remains a cold case. Months prior to her disappearance, Clark was a witness to her boyfriend's murder. She gave her testimony back in October. During this time, they still hadn't found her boyfriend's killer, who was seemingly a stranger and murdered Clark's boyfriend for no apparent reason. She played a major role in the case, and it definitely would have been to the killer's benefit if she wasn't giving her testimony. There is one hole in this theory though. Clark witnessed her boyfriend's murder in October, which is 2 entire months before she was abducted. The investigation could have still been going on, but Clark would have already shared any important details with the police by this time, making her kidnap or possible murder a waste of time and resources. If the person who killed Clark's boyfriend is the same person who kidnapped Clark, then it raises the question, why? Why would someone kill a stranger in cold blood and then murder his girlfriend 2 months later? While I generally lean towards the simple explanations, this one just doesn't seem to be it. Unfortunately, in cases like these, everything has to be considered, and while sympathizing with the victim is important, it's also important to note that anything is possible. Kansas City has had problems with gangs for years, and with the Clark case especially, it seems more and more likely that gangs played at least some kind of role in the case at the very least. For one, maybe Clark's boyfriend had some kind of connection to a gang. Maybe he was killed for not paying up and the person who kidnapped Gina Clark wasn't the same person, but another person in the same gang. All of a sudden, this case makes a lot more sense. Another possible scenario is that Clark and her boyfriend both played some kind of a role in a gang. There are dozens of cases where gang members turn on each other, and if that's the case, it may very well be the explanation. The hard part is trying to determine anything definitively. There's not a lot of information on this case, which is why it remains a mystery. Surprisingly enough, Gina Clark isn't the only girl to disappear in Missouri under strange circumstances in 1991. Cheryl Kenny, Angela Hammond, Pamela Dalton, as well as the Springfield 3 all vanished from their homes or public places without anyone noticing until they were long gone. The creepy part being that there were often other people around during these abductions, making it seem as if these girls had been targeted for some reason. For those of you who don't know, the Springfield 3 case gained a lot of notoriety in the media. 3 women were all possibly kidnapped from the same home one night with no apparent signs of struggle. It was as if they just disappeared. The Springfield 3 case not only happened in the same year, but also in close proximity to these other cases. From February to December of 1991, 7 young women all disappeared without a trace from Missouri. Before I get into my final theory on how these cases all connect, I want to discuss the Springfield case briefly first. This is a fascinating topic that should honestly warrant its own video, and who knows, maybe I'll make a full video on it in the future. But the Springfield case stands out so much because it's one of the craziest things to happen in a disappearance case. Susie, Streeter, and Stacy McCall went to Streeter's mom's house to spend the night. Streeter's mom being Cheryl Levitt. They were planning on attending a water park the next day with some of their friends. However, when morning came, none of the women were found, leading many to believe that they were kidnapped. Like I said earlier, there were no signs of a struggle, forced entry, or anything of the sort. If you didn't know any better, you'd think the 3 of them were zapped into space by aliens. However, a theory proposed by this Reddit user may have the answers for everyone's questions. It would have been difficult to outright kidnap 3 women, especially if this was done by a single man. But it would have been much easier if this man posed as a police officer. There are hundreds of cases across the country of people impersonating police officers, and it honestly is not very difficult to do. If this man was posing as a cop, he could have convinced the 3 women into his vehicle, and they may not have been able to escape. This theory explains why there was no sign of a forced entry, why there was no sign of a struggle, why no neighbors heard anything, and why the dog was locked up. This explanation explains a lot, but it has one giant hole. Why would these women leave behind their purses, wallets, and IDs if they thought they were going to a police station? I couldn't imagine a scenario where someone is ready to go talk to the police for any reason and leave the house without an ID. The only decent counter-argument to this point would be to say the officer told the women they wouldn't need the IDs, which should have warranted some suspicion, but for all we know, this may have been the case. Maybe the man posing as an officer was a master manipulator and was able to give the women a false sense of security. People with these sociopathic tendencies often have that ability. One possible theory is that all of these women were kidnapped by a single person or a single organization. If you look at this map with the locations of each of the disappearances, you'll quickly notice that they are each oddly spread out, which means they may have been organized. Keep in mind, this is just me marking spots on a map in Photoshop. It's not 100% accurate, but I did the best I could. But even if it's just rough estimations, these cases are eerily spaced out. If this was the work of a single individual, then they are likely highly intelligent and sociopathic. The amount of effort and planning that would need to go into something like this would be massive, especially in the Springfield 3 case. As I've stated earlier, some of these women disappeared from their homes while there were other people in the house, and others disappeared from public places. And if this was done by a single man, it would also mean he's very good at hiding the bodies. Having kidnapped at least 7 women and none of their bodies being knowingly discovered. The alternative is that there was an organized group kidnapping these women and using them for nefarious purposes, likely sex trafficking of some kind. When there is an organization of criminals, it's much more difficult to solve these cases because they often know how law enforcement works to some degree. If someone understands how police look for evidence and determine who perpetrated a crime, it makes it much easier to get away with crimes like these. It's been 26 years since any of these crimes have taken place, and what exactly happened may never be known, but there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, even if we can't see it. If you have any information on the Gina Clark case, be sure to contact the Kansas City Police Department at this number. I'm also going to leave the numbers for these other cases in the description down below. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was a very interesting video to do research for. And if you guys want to see more, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below.